Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. We're going to talk about the video game industry. We're going to talk about Nintendo laughing Microsoft out of the room. Microsoft apparently wanted to buy them about 20 years ago, and they freaking laughed them out of the room, and it's a good thing they did because Nintendo is definitely killing it these days with Switch sales. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to, kind of dip back in on the PlayStation 5 debacle that Sony is not selling nearly as many PlayStation 5s as they thought they were going to. In fact, the brand is damaged in Japan, and a lot of it has to do with censorship. And you can see the difference between Sony censoring everything and players choosing not to support Sony consoles, and the Switch killing it right now and releasing games uncensored. Before we get into it, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We're over 168,000 subs. Thank you so much for the support. We do talk about video games. We talk about the comic book industry, the animation industries, anime, whatever is interesting to us that day. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on in pop culture, so we just kind of talk about whatever. So, here we go. This is coming from Engadget. I think they got it via Bloomberg that Microsoft tried to buy Nintendo, but they literally got laughed out of the room. Literally, they got laughed out of the room. The company wanted Nintendo's software for the original Xbox. Again, coming from Engadget. It's already been 2 decades since Microsoft first announced the Xbox. Specifically, the Xbox was unveiled at CES in 2001. And Bloomberg published an in-depth oral history of how the console came to be. It's fascinating to read, but one particular passage stands out. Details on Microsoft's efforts to secure games for the brand new console. While the company implored third-party developers to work on the Xbox, Microsoft also considered using its considerable financial might to buy developers. And Microsoft set its sights high, approaching Nintendo about an acquisition. Microsoft was laughed out of the room, says Kevin Bacchus, a director for third-party relations on the Xbox project. They just laughed their asses off, he said to Bloomberg. Like, imagine an hour of somebody just laughing at you. That was kind of how the meeting went. That's freaking hilarious. And you know what? I have to think that Nintendo knew what would happen if some big corporation came in and bought them out. We've seen it. We've seen it when Disney goes out and they throw money at Lucasfilm, and they throw money at Marvel, and they throw money at Pixar. It just becomes an acquisition to them. And if you can hold out these companies, these smaller studios, smaller companies, if they can hold out, they can do pretty amazing things. I mean, Nintendo has always been huge. But, the Switch has definitely seen a resurgence in popularity of Nintendo, even amongst more hardcore gamers. For the longest time, Nintendo was kind of looked at as being the family console, your kid brother's console. Mom plays Nintendo. And that, for their first-party titles, is still the case, right? But Nintendo Switch now has sort of had a second life as the home console that releases uncensored or lightly censored versions of Japanese games, because Sony is not doing it. Sony is censoring the hell out of everything, even games that were released 20 years ago. I keep using Final Fantasy VIII as an example where Final Fantasy VIII, one of the summons, I think it was Siren, was changed because it looked like she had a muff even though she didn't. And Renoa, one of the main characters, she had too much cleavage, so we had to cover her up. But we're seeing all kinds of drama now and all kinds of pressure being put on Nintendo for not censoring games, including since, was it Cyberpunk Ghost Story, Top Hat Studios. They've been having all kinds of problems with getting blowback on Twitter from people that think that Nintendo needs to be a kiddie platform, when really, I don't think it's about that. I think it's about trying to control the industry with Western sensibilities. And can you imagine if Nintendo sold out to Microsoft based in Seattle? What could have potentially happened? Current year, maybe not 20 years ago, But current year, if Nintendo and Microsoft were working together and the West were dictating the kind of content that would be allowed, I don't know how that would go. Look at what happened to Sony moving its operations to California. And we're going to talk more about that because this is sort of, I guess, my unified theory of everything. What is going on in gaming? Why are gaming journos nuts? Why is there so much censorship in gaming? And I think it has to do with where these companies are located and who they have working for them, and that they've lost the plot. They're no longer, Japanese-owned companies. They're Japanese-owned, I guess, but mostly the Americans are making the decisions. And if Microsoft bought Nintendo, that absolutely would have been the case. They said that Microsoft's pitch did make some amount of sense. At the time, Nintendo was lagging behind Sony badly from a hardware perspective. Yeah, the N64 didn't do so hot. It did okay, but not great. And then the GameCube came out and it didn't do that well either. It wasn't until the Wii came out that Nintendo really started to pick up momentum again. So Microsoft figured it could take on a hardware production duty and leave Nintendo to focus on the software. We actually had Nintendo in our building in January of 2000 to work through the details of a joint venture where we gave them all the technical specs of the Xbox, said the head of business development, Bob McBreen. The pitch was that their hardware stunk, and compared to the PlayStation, it did. The idea was, listen, you're much better at the game portions of it with Mario and all that stuff. Why don't you let us take care of the hardware? But it didn't work out. No, it didn't work out. You got laughed out of the room. Like an hour of somebody just laughing at you. That's how it went. While it was certainly the most notable of Microsoft's failed acquisitions, there were a few other notable developers who passed on the company's overtures. EA was the first company that Microsoft reached out to. The software giant passed with a more simple no thanks. Microsoft was also meeting with Square, now known as Square Enix, and Mortal Kombat developer Midway. One acquisition that did go through was Bungie. They were a little known developer, right? And we know what happened there with Bungie. But yeah, that's freaking hilarious. And Nintendo did the right thing. I think more companies need to do this because you run the risk when you become part of a bigger entity of them, being able to censor, and you lose yourself. Lucasfilm and Marvel Comics and Pixar and all these other things that Disney acquires, they lose themselves. Look at Warner Media. A really good example, Rooster Teeth. Look at what Rooster Teeth was compared to what Rooster Teeth is now and what Rooster Teeth will probably wind up being, which is just a brand thrown onto some of Warner's cartoon shows that they put on HBO Max. That plucky little independent production company ceases to be. And I think in some ways, I understand the temptation to sell out. I get it. But I think in some ways, it's like you lose your soul. You just add it's like the Borg. You basically are just adding your culture and collective consciousness to a bigger thing, but you cease being yourself. But they can brag that they've got you as part of the collective. And Nintendo was very smart. Again, we're seeing all the problems now with censorship on Sony's part, that it actually is hurting them. It actually is hurting them, and it's hurting their sales big time. We did a video the other day talking about how the PlayStation is in decline in Japan. The PS5 may sell less than half of what the PS4 sold. That's pretty freaking dire. The brand is diluted. People, they don't care. The Japanese don't care. Meanwhile, even here in the States, the PlayStation censorship crackdown has helped Nintendo Switch become a fan service haven. And this is a battle that's being fought. Now, it seems like all these journalists are kind of ganging up on Nintendo for allowing uncensored games to appear on their platform. We've got game journalists beating up on Top Hat Studios in this cyberpunk anime game Sense. People were complaining about big boobs. They posted the receipts, actually. I do believe that they were getting harassed because people don't think this kind of content belongs on Nintendo for sure. But beyond that, I don't think they believe it belongs in the industry, because we're talking about the industry, which is now based mostly out of Seattle and LA, and it has those sensibilities. The journalists, they all tend to congregate in those areas, and we can kind of see what's going on here. We need Nintendo to stay independent. Sony never should have moved its operations to California, because we've seen a lot of freaking weirdness ever since then. and it's hurting them. I mean, they might be getting woke points with gaming journos, but they're losing it. Now, here in the States, the PS5 is actually doing pretty good. We own one. We bought one. I debated, but we did buy one. And, you know, it's okay. There's not a lot of games for it yet. But, I mean, it has the potential to be a good system. It's just that, you know, in its home country, it's not taking off. So we're basically going to have another Xbox scenario, you know, if it continues to go like this. So, yeah, that was a bullet dodged. Thank God Nintendo did not sell out to Microsoft, or, you know, it would be a totally different ballgame right now. And I think gamers can rejoice that this didn't happen. I think it's hilarious that they literally laughed them out of the room. Awesome. More studios need to turn down corporate money, for sure. I'm going to wrap this up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.